Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to welcome you to Spotlight on the NGV Collection, a unique series of live online events designed exclusively for supporters of the NGV. Through this series, we will explore unique aspects of the NGV Collection over the coming months. My name is Misha Exarian, and I'm Associate Director of Fundraising at the NGV. And from my remote working location, I wish to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which this event is taking place. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be joining us today. So, thank you again for attending this slightly revised online session exclusively for NGV supporters. While the look and feel of this presentation may be hampered slightly due to Melbourne's current lockdown, I do hope it hasn't diminished the focus for our session today. Following a recent talk to members of the Alexandra Club on the NGV's digital response during the pandemic, we invited our director, Tony Ellwood, to share a similar presentation to Foundation members here today. As many of you will know, with the exception of a brief period in late June, the NGV doors have largely been closed to the public since the middle of March. Despite this, our digital offering of online programs and events has actively continued to celebrate the depth and richness of the NGV collection. From online courses for lifelong learners to activities for families to enjoy at home, we're proud to have reached millions of people globally through online initiatives and social media stories. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Tony, who will share personal insight behind the NGV's move to embrace a digital realm and offer ways in which departments across the gallery have focused on maintaining connections with our audiences, both locally and globally during the period. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce a man who needs no introduction. It is a delight to hand you over to Tony Ellwood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Misha. It's wonderful to be presenting to the Foundation today on what has been a very unexpected topic for us, which has been, during a COVID environment, an incredible opportunity in many ways to continue to remain open in the digital sense and provide a whole raft of new content and new thinking that I think will actually have a very positive impact on the business long term. So as close supporters of what we do every day, we wanted to make sure that you got to know NGV every day, which was a hashtag and a new digital brand that we launched literally the day we closed in the middle of March. And the next day we started with a whole raft of new content. And here's just an example from the University of Melbourne saying that they felt that this was a sort of a benchmark in terms of how engagement could continue in this new environment, which has really helped spur us on. Amazingly, and I had to reread this figure when I saw it, over 20 million people have actually engaged with our social media content. When we say people, we count it as eyeballs. So there's been 20 million views of the various content that's been delivered. And that's something that's quite extraordinary. And it's a reach that we would not have in a normal environment. You can see here just the enormous amount of virtual tours, 450,000 plus, over 900 posts that we've delivered, incredible amount of new followers. The growth across all of our platforms has been extraordinary. And you can see generation of content is amazing too, with over 121 videos created, but also the emails sent, 55. So, we have a rolling program that is there to tailor to each of our different accounts. So whether it's 350,000 followers on Instagram or our 200,000+ followers on Facebook, but also interestingly a whole new growth market coming into, say, LinkedIn, for example, and the design store has had just phenomenal uptake in recent times with all that online shopping, I suspect. We also have tried to think of segmenting the audiences and where we wanted to be able to have very direct communication. This is an example where, through our foundation list predominantly, we've been able to come from a formal message every Sunday from myself, which I have a lot of support to draft, and we range in topics from seasonal change to Australian storytelling to fashion. It could be anything. We're having a lot of fun picking a whole range of new ideas, including even just the theme of yellow, which is interesting, was one of the most popular, and I thought that was our highest risk idea to date. But it is actually just another platform where we feel that people have time. A lot of people are also quite lonely at the moment and isolated, to sit down and read long form writing. So breaking a lot of rules from what we would normally do, and create very rich content with additional links, providing greater content should you require that, so that you can actually get to know and love the collection more than you ever have before. And this is the sort of testimonies we're getting back from people saying, you know, they've never been able to sort of sit down and really enjoy the collection so much, and they're seeing what we're trying to do with community at the same time. We also send through another range of e-news forums on a Monday, which is also another way of looking at another collection-based program that we do, and the richness of stories, but also our exhibitions. And this is an interesting point. There's over 20,000 direct messages, and we've all been saying as a group of staff, we've never felt so close to our constituents, even though we've been shut for such a long period of time, because the amount of immediate feedback that we get when we're creating all of this content is so enormous, and it's so heartfelt. I'm very grateful, predominantly very, very positive, but at times it's also redirecting some of our thinking and reminding us of some other areas that people are interested in. So we've been able to create content, but also archive a lot of content. So the channel, which you can access through our website, is also effectively, it's all the video content that we create. We've created an enormous amount of new content, but also we've been able to archive a lot of other assets that have been created in recent times. You can see the growth here. It's almost 5,000% in terms of people coming and sitting down and enjoying those different stories, which you can drive. You can access it anytime you like. This just gives you an insight into some of the stories that our curators have been sharing. It's been an enormously popular series, ranging from Asian art, European masters, contemporary, and also the modern Australian period. And it gives a voice to many of the creators to really highlight aspects of the collection that they may not normally talk about or share. So that's been a very popular series, as has this in-studio series that we've been doing after hours. These are in the evenings. Curators, you can see them on the top row, talking to a range of different practitioners, as you see on the bottom row. That's Iris van Herpen, second from the left, the very famous Dutch fashion designer. She was a particularly popular forum with over 300 people. When we talk about talks like this, 1-hour talks with curators, if we do them on site in the building, we might get 40 or 50 people, which is still a very good outcome. But to think that you can get 300 just from doing it from home is really quite amazing. This is another, just one of the many series that we do, but this is one that we did where artists were invited to talk, digital artists, video artists, were talking about how they construct and form their own video practice. And for many people, it's a real insight into a medium that many people don't really understand the intricacies of. And this had an incredible uptake, over 400,000 views, which was really a great eye-opener for us. We've also been looking at ways in which we can help people to understand the different art historical terms. So using a range of different prompts, we've been actually talking about sort of key art histories that help you understand our collection, but also the general building blocks of art history across a broad range of time. These have been shared through Instagram and Facebook. I'll give you a bit of an insight into how these have been working, because they're very simple, but they're just basically questions. And then this one, for example, on Impressionism, then starts to take you through various key markers or attributes that relate to it, Impressionism, but told through our collection. So it's also anchoring our collection in world art history in that regard. We have a wonderful and rich knowledge base through our voluntary guides, and we thought we would be remiss not to invite them to also do a series of posts, particularly given that it's during National Volunteer Week, I should say, when we really highlighted them as our primary message at that time. And so many of the guides have depth of knowledge and a particular area of passion, so it really came through in this series of posts that was very well supported. Here's an example of two different glass narratives by two different guides, one looking at the modern period in glass production and one looking at the Venetian glass, and all the various attributes that go towards the history, the social history, but also the technical and art historical references. We've also been looking at a whole range of different parts of the business in detail, like our conservation department, for example, which is incredibly popular. Whenever we go to tell stories, people are fascinated that we have this group of around 30 scientists who work down in the basement, preserving the collection and maintaining it for the future. We've never been able to share so many stories as we have in the last 6 months. And the uptake on that has been truly remarkable. And looking across the whole range of conservation, there's painting, there's objects, there's textiles, there's paper. It's a whole range. There's frames. You can see a frame being made here, and someone has turned their backyard into a studio to keep the frame program going, which is really, really great. Jason, our frame maker. You've also got a range of our staff here talking about how they specialise in what they do. We wanted to highlight the women that work in conservation as well with Science Week. We also wanted to give a range of virtual tours, particularly some of the programs that were shut prior to their official closing time in March. So the Cause tour, for example, the Comme des Garçons exhibition, which had to close early, and also Basquiat and Haring. Simon, our curator of contemporary art and one of the curators of the Cause exhibition, did a 4-part guided tour of the Cause show and received this phenomenal reach of over 350,000. I should say too, when we're getting this kind of reach, it's not just a domestic audience, we're getting quite a large international following coming to our site now as well, which is the sort of reach that we dreamt of having that we're now finding we're getting. Similarly, with Judith Ryan's Indigenous art program around marking time, another collection-based show that had to close early, we were really thrilled with the response to that 5-part series. We thought it would also be interesting to talk to a group of people that we know, artists that we know, particularly photographers, to say, well, what are you doing during COVID? What's your home and work life look like? This is William Wegman, the American photographer, who you may remember from the exhibition that he did several years ago, where he features his dogs in all of his photography. So of course they feature in his relaxed home life as well, although you see in this studio there's 1 or 2 shots where the dogs are harder to distinguish, but it's very rare for a Wegman photograph to not have a dog in it. But this is quite a generous insight into his private life. It's also been shared through John Gollings, a very well-known Melbourne photographer, very respected for his architectural photography and street photography. And we've also shown Anne Zahalka, very well known in Australian art photography circles. You can see her working life, her home life, doing her exercises in the lounge room like many of us. And Yvonne Todd, you know, interestingly, Yvonne regarded for that very austere, clean, pure aesthetic, and yet at home you see there's sort of a nice, healthy counter to that, which we were all not expecting. This is part of a global program that we did under our NGV Everyday tag. People were selecting famous images from around the world and recreating them at home. And of course, we were very fortunate to have some local entrants that were quite extraordinary. Here's our Weeping Woman being recreated. We also have The Two Typists by John Brack, really remarkable resemblance that's been created, hand-finished background as well. John Russell, slightly less obvious connection for me here, but very good attempt with the peonies, although I believe that peonies have been transplanted by roses, but we get the point. Beautiful change of the mother and baby to the sister and baby, but that same gentle palette and the very tender beauty of that photograph makes a lovely response. And then possibly the least expected and most humorous of all responses today has been this take on our Schenk. Of course, the Danish artist, the dying lamb at the foot of the sheep with the crows ready to attack. One of the most heart-wrenching, but also historically always one of the most popular works in our collection. The sheep replaced by a dog and the lamb replaced by a teddy bear. A lot of people came to us and said, "Look, we really missed the Friday nights," and sort of, you know, worried about what does it mean to have that kind of program back into our formal programming. And so we thought, well, let's try and at least allude to that atmosphere that people have missed and create it back at work. So while we were still able to go into the building at one point, we quickly had a series of DJs engaged, and our team did a wonderful lighting of the spaces and created an atmosphere that was really very engaging. Here's a sort of counter to that musical program. This is an initiative that we did with Victoria. inviting soloists to respond to various rooms in the gallery. A beautiful way of contextualising the collection, but also including our other creative friends in the sector. Similarly, working with the Australian Ballet on the launch of this beautiful program called Body Talk, using the empty and vast volumes of the gallery as a platform for expressing their own creativity. This is from the State of Music program initiated through the Premier's office. A very famous local group, the Teskey Brothers, were looking for a venue to perform. They ended up with the #1 song the week that they performed this, so we were delighted to have been associated and to have supported them during this challenging time. We also worked with Tourism Australia to actually create a sort of a live tour environment for the collection that could be nationally and internationally promoted, and that had a very good uptake across a range of platforms, both with Visit Victoria, Visit Melbourne, and also tourismaustralia.com. We've also continued to market and promote all the platforms, because a lot of people will say to us, well, I knew you had Facebook, or I knew you had Instagram, but I wasn't aware of all the other attributes that you had. So this is a way of trying to just remind people that this is what we have, and that we serialize a lot of our content so that you can actually come and see something, whether it might be programs for under 5s, which we do, whether it's Japanese modernism or native plants, teens programs around fashion with RMIT. Friday nights we've talked about Indigenous content that we do, and even just a singular focus on a work of art like our famous Elizabeth Thompson 19th century narrative. We've also done programs that are focused in just on lovely Melbourne themes, the Paris End, Collins Street. Our international students is a series of programs that we do for international students to give them an introduction to parts of our local art history. So there's one on Central Australia, there's one on the Kimberleys and Arnhem Land. Again, with the teens, we're looking at different local artists like Latong Atem, and then things for kids with our art club, but also talking about some great acts of philanthropy like the Andre Harkness gift, which has been a phenomenal recent and transformative collection of female Australian artists. We're also working directly with China, for example, which is such a strong market for us here as tourists, and also as people who've moved here. We maintained that program when many didn't continue on with these platforms. We thought we should and wanted to, and we, much to our astonishment, ended up being ranked in the top 2 or 3 museums in the world on many of their platforms, whether they be Weibo or WeChat, which is great recognition, and I think a sign of some mutual respect. We've also done a lot of children and school programs. You can see that the pickup has been huge with virtual excursions and a new uptake of schools. We already have a very broad range of schools, but even more now with an increase of 17%, and that includes international schools. You can see here a very cute picture of a virtual excursion for young kids, all working with their teacher to show their journey through the gallery. And great feedback from the education sector. Many talking about that the distance no longer seems an issue because they can come in as rural students and have the same quality of digital service that you would get here in the city. And great way to build a new market for us and to service as much of the state as we possibly can. This has been great. If you look at the downloading of activities, over 80,000 activity sheets for children, over 4,000 participants in virtual programs. It's beyond what we could have expected. So there's some other downloads depending on the activity that we do. And we work with various partners to produce those as well. Also audio description. So for people who are visually impaired, we have people who are trained to talk in more detail about an artwork to help give the visual description in great detail. Conscious too of people who just want some company with other people, and art is a great way of bringing everyone together in an equal platform. So there's virtual teas that we've been doing, funded by the Drummer Foundation. It's been a great opportunity for people to just reconnect. We've also been doing a range of live events where we actually look at artworks in greater detail. So easy ways for people to just start to learn different highlights of particular works. So sharing the RAMs, showing people the initial sketch for that work, and then highlighting some of the key figures, explaining who they were, how they were made to build the composition during the time, showing things like X-ray photography here to talk about how the artist has obviously grappled with the composition in the various passages as well. Our online drawing tutorials have also been incredibly popular. People love to have permission to draw, but it's a great way for people of all ages and all walks of life to come together, start with a blank piece of paper and see together what they can come together with. When we do these on site, we get hundreds of people.
Hello, my name is Minna Gilligan. I'm an artist based here in Melbourne. I work with drawing, painting and collage, and usually my works are very colourful, filled with the spirit of the 60s and 70s, so very vibrant. Today I'm going to be referencing Andy Warhol's Self-Portrait No. 9, as well as David Hockney's The Second Marriage, drawing from them both and making a kind of mash-up work from those two, so we'll see what happens.
So that gives you a sense of what some of those programs can feel like as they unfold. Also, a lot of these online courses that we've been doing have had quite phenomenal uptake. I think over 800 people have enrolled in this 4-course series, and we had to actually close enrolments, which we didn't think would happen, just to be able to service everybody. And we've been receiving great feedback. We also did one on the art of writing. This is something that clearly we want to maintain a commitment to even when we reopen, because clearly there's a great demand for this sequential learning. Similarly, the magazine, which if you're a member, you would receive on a regular basis, but we decided to download back copies for people from the last year or so, and this has had an incredible uptake. So we'll continue to do that after a few months after the magazine has been sent to members. These are just some of the videos when we've been able to get access that we've created with our specialists talking about key highlights of the collection. These are talks that you can just take yourself through.
My name's Dolly Whitfield. I'm a curator here at the NGV in the Fashion and Textiles department. Today we're going to go on a tour of Collecting Com, which is the latest exhibition done by our department. Collecting Com looks at the extraordinary work of Japanese fashion designer Rei Kawakubo, and the exhibition is drawn from the NGV's own rich holdings. These have been donated to us by local collector Takamasa Takahashi over the last 10 years, and the exhibition is supplemented by works from his own archive.
We've also included playlists, so one that's more meditative, others on just music that relates to certain exhibitions or strengths in our collection, which have been well received. So you can see a very broad range of opportunities and creative ideas we've been able to come up with. Self-guided experiences again here, looking at a whole range of different topics that you can sift through online. Also, we've been able to work directly with partners, so Mercedes, who are a great supporter, to a large database of content relevant to them. Another one that we did with the Sofitel on Collins, great story about the 1950s Melbourne and told through this dress. Our partner Flowers Varzette did a wonderful series of floristry courses, again inspired by key works from the permanent collection. And then our tertiary partners, which are extraordinary to us, the University of Melbourne, RMIT, Deakin and La Trobe, have all partnered on various subjects that are dear to them. This is the drawing classes which Melbourne University have supported. RMIT and Deakin have been looking at also courses around architecture, design and local art stories. And La Trobe have also done a series of bespoke programs around exhibitions, particularly in this case, Busquet and Haring. We worked with the Commonwealth Bank to create a range of content for children for a certain category of their clients. So that's a whole new area of business for us. And then for our Business Council, we've created a tour of the Destiny exhibition, which was installed just prior to closure. It didn't officially open. It is sitting there very ready to open whenever we can. But we wanted to give Business Council, who are great contributors to our programming, a bit of a sneak peek before we do open. So these are some of the tailored events that we do for supporters in various online categories. I'm sure many of you are members of some of these groups, whether they're Australian art or design groups or conservation. Our conservation team have also been using the digital environment to conduct a whole range of courses, particularly for our public gallery sector. 37 galleries from Victoria joined our classes headed by Michael Varco-Cox, our Head of Conservation, just to make sure that during this period of closure the collections were properly preserved and that they understood the needs for various types of storage and how to make sure light sensitive material is looked after carefully, and things like that, just sort of the practical nuts and bolts of caring for collections, and particularly for an unusually long period of closure like this, it's very important. And also, this is just showing you some of the microsite content, so much richer content about conservation than we've ever had before, for those that are interested in it, in looking and drilling into very, very specific areas or specialisations. This is an interesting one for us because you're aware, of course, that we have our annual appeal, and you can see the great works that we achieve as a result of that each year. We almost didn't have an appeal this year. We felt that with so many other community groups in need that it was probably a time for us to step back, but we were actually approached by so many people to continue on with the appeal, people who are used to regular giving and who said, we still want to give. But we said, well, that would be lovely. Let's do it and see how we go. And much to our surprise, going in very late and having no live events and no annual dinner or anything like that, we still were able to be really quite humbled, I have to say, by an extraordinary amount of support to acquire a major work which will feature in the triennial at the end of this year, we hope. Going beyond the annual appeal, there's also been some great philanthropic gifts and opportunities for the NGV during this period, which I wanted to share with you. And arrange just a highlight of some key pieces that have really made a big difference to us. One of those works is this recent painting presented through the estate of James Fairfax, presented by Bridge Star. It's a spectacular Italian Baroque painting by Giovanni Romanelli. It's a work from 1641 that has actually been on loan in our Italian collection for some time, but we're delighted to have it formally welcomed into the collection and now on display as a permanent work. In addition to that, we were able to acquire a major painting by Ben Quilty, very well known Australian contemporary artist. I'm sure many of you have heard of Ben. We've been looking for the right work for quite some time, and we wanted a really key piece, a masterpiece, and we feel that we found it with this work, the 150 Rorschach, which is actually an astonishing 9 meters in length, with his signature thick layered paint resulting in this incredible gestural composition. So this was funded and then gifted through the Felton bequest. So we're delighted to have this, and we'll have this on display at NGV Australia next year. Andre Harkness, who sadly passed away earlier this year, was an incredible collector of Australian women artists from the late 19th century through to the mid 20th century. She gave a very large and remarkable collection she quietly built over many, many decades, including this wonderful work by Grace Cossington Smith from 1935. In addition, there were many great highlights, but here's just a sample from Dorrit Black, Dora Meeson, and Hilda Rix Nicholas. Isa Ray is an Australian artist, actually Melbourne trained, who went to France with her family and never returned at the turn of the century, in the 19th century. And this is unusual because it's a work of great scale and of impressionist beauty that we'd not seen before. This is about 1 metre tall, this picture of a local girl in a French village that she lived in. This work, which was acquired through the very generous support of Christina Campbell-Pretty and family, as well as Professor Graham Pearson and Christine Pearson and the Norma Adwell bequest. This will make a huge contribution to our representation of women of this particular period in Australian art history, and we look forward to presenting it in a major exhibition next year as well. And finally, I wanted to finish with this extraordinary acquisition funded through our great fashion champion, Christina Campbell-Pretty as well, but along with the David Richards bequest. It's a 1988 Yves Saint Laurent jacket. It was considered at the height of Saint Laurent's couture practice and has amazingly 350,000 sequins and 100,000 ceramic bugle beads, all individually placed across the jacket. The painting that it's inspired by, of course, is Van Gogh's iconic vase with 15 flowers from sunflowers from 1888. So, this is just a sample of just some of the incredible things that have come into the collection, but works that make a huge impact and a real difference to visitors that will come in. So that's what I wanted to really share with you today, and finish on an interesting story that also shows that with the use of technology, because in this case it was the use of X-rays, we're able to still do a lot of research on the collection, even remotely or through visits that are connected to collection, care and maintenance. This is an incredible find from our head of conservation, Michael Varco Cox. The famous McCubbin painting, The Pioneer of 1904, of course, is a famous triptych. What he discovered is that there was a panel in the centre that actually had another picture painted on it prior to the narrative that we see today and know today, which is that work on the left. In the central panel was another painting called Found, which shows the pioneer there with the child in the foreground. This is a work that we'd seen in a scrapbook that was owned by McCubbin, but it had always been assumed that it had been lost. What we discovered is that his diary entry talked about the work being of such a large scale, nobody wanted to purchase it at the time. What we've realised through Michael's research and through the X-ray photography is that actually the work coming through the image depicts that this was Found, the other painting, coming through the central panel of Pioneer. So quite a breakthrough, quite extraordinary for us, given that it was a work that we all believed had just been destroyed or lost at some point. Actually, it's just sitting there underneath another famous picture. So, you know, our collection never ceases to surprise us, and you can never stop researching, because you never know how many more layers or stories are going to come upon us. So they're just some of the things that we wanted to share with you. We hope that you are as excited as we are to reopen and share the NGV with you as soon as possible. Thank you.